My name is Walter Kent. I'm 61 years old, and for the past 26 years, I ran the production floor at Wexler Components, a third-generation family-owned business in Akron, Ohio. I wasn't a flashy guy, never had to be. I wasn't the one making headlines or shaking hands at expos. I was the one making sure the machines didn't fail, the shipments went out on time, and the workforce stayed loyal. Quiet consistency. That was my currency. It was enough for Harold Wexler, the man who built the company with his bare hands. He'd once told me, "Walter, when you're in charge, I sleep better." That meant everything to me. So imagine my surprise when, 5 weeks after Harold retired due to health issues, I was called into the conference room by his son, Connor. 33 years old, full of ambition and buzzwords, and barely 5 months into his CEO era. The moment I walked in, I could tell this wasn't going to be a check-in. He didn't offer a seat, didn't even look up from his laptop at first. Then he leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head and said, "We need to modernize, Walter. Streamline. You understand, right? We just can't have guys clinging to the past slowing us down." It was a cliché dressed up as a strategy. No thanks. No handshake. No mention of my 2.5 decades of loyalty. Just a verbal push out the door, wrapped in corporate jargon, and delivered like he was firing a barista. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for reconsideration. I just nodded once and said, "You'll get my badge by noon." He smiled, thinking that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Not even close. Have you ever been blindsided by someone who had no idea what you actually do? Drop a comment below. You're not alone. And sometimes, silence is just the start of the storm. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, the sunlight falling across the same wood grain I'd eaten breakfast on for 23 years. My wife, Alice, had passed away 5 years earlier, and since then, this table had become both my office and my comfort zone. I pulled out the dusty accordion folder, marked WK Employment, from the filing cabinet, and began flipping through nearly 3 decades of paper. And then I found it, buried in a 2008 contract amendment, written in plain legal language that Connor, in all his rush to streamline, had clearly never read. In the event of a termination not explicitly documented as cause, the employee shall be entitled to severance equal to 24 months of current base salary, in addition to all accrued retirement contributions, stock options and performance bonuses as recorded in the 5 most recent fiscal years. I couldn't help but chuckle. Harold had insisted on this clause after the company flirted with private equity, wanting to make sure I stayed through the turbulence. "If they ever try to push you out," he'd said, "they'll have to pay what you're worth." At the time, I thought it was overkill. But now, it was my sword and shield. I called Martin Blake, a no-nonsense labor attorney I'd known since Alice's diagnosis. He read the clause and laughed. "Walter, this is gold. You could walk into mediation tomorrow and walk out with a check that starts with a 3. I asked him to start preparing the paperwork. 3 days later, Wexler Components received a letter. It was clean, professional. No threats, just a reminder of the terms Connor had inherited without ever bothering to understand them. The silence that followed. Deafening. Sometimes, protecting your future doesn't look like revenge. It looks like preparation. If you've ever found power in a forgotten contract or quiet detail, leave a balance symbol in the comments. By the time Wexler's legal department responded, the damage was already done. The letter they sent back was thin, evasive, clearly written by someone hoping I didn't know how to read fine print. But Martin had already filed the necessary paperwork with the county court. And suddenly, it wasn't just about a severance clause. It was about age discrimination, breach of contract, and wrongful termination. The kind of case no company wants in local headlines. Connor called me directly 2 days later. "Walter, this is all a misunderstanding," he said, his voice tight. "We can offer you 6 months severance and a positive letter of reference." I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I said, "Connor, read section 11.4 again. I'm not looking for charity. I'm looking for what I'm owed." That's when the tone changed. "You'll never work in this industry again," he snapped. "No one wants a bitter old man stirring up lawsuits," I replied calmly. "Funny. I already got an offer." And I had. 2, in fact. One from a competitor I'd outperformed for years. The other from a startup co-founded by one of my former apprentices. Turns out, when you lead with integrity and don't burn bridges, people remember. And they call. The lawsuit settled out of court 2 weeks later. Full severance, back retirement contributions, and a formal apology that I didn't even ask for. But the real satisfaction came slowly. First, when I heard that 2 of the senior engineers had resigned, both citing Connor's leadership as the reason. Then a production delay. Then a major contract lost. Then a rumor that the board had started reviewing Connor's decision-making. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Because the truth is, I hadn't done anything but stand my ground. The collapse was theirs, and it had started the moment they thought experience was disposable. 6 months later, I walked through the doors of Anchor Dynamics, the new firm started by 3 ex-Wexler engineers. I wasn't there for a job. I was there as a partner. Silent at first, but as the projects grew, so did my role. And when we landed the logistics contract Wexler lost, I signed the agreement myself. Connor never called again. Harold never apologized, though he did send a Christmas card, unsigned, but with a single line, written in familiar block letters. "Thank you for never raising your voice. Have you ever been treated like you were replaceable, only to come back stronger?" Drop your story in the comments. We're building something better here. Subscribe for more stories of justice, dignity, and long-overdue redemption. Because sometimes the best revenge is being impossible to replace.